culture.
"Riddle me this, Batman," said one of Gotham's most inept hand-to-hand fighters and most brilliant minds. The Riddler, or Enigma, LOL, has been a big part of every adaptation of The Dark Knight, and remains a pretty important part of the comics too. Also, as his history stretches back really rather far, he's become something of a big fish amongst the on and off inmates of Arkham Asylum. But it's also littered with weird turns in character, off-center portrayals, and mistakes that DC Comics have tried desperately to cover up. With that in mind, I'm Ben from What Culture, and here are 10 things DC wants you to forget about the Riddler. Number 10. He's rather similar to the Joker. Right, so the Joker isn't the most original chap in the world, but you've got to admit he's memorable. So memorable, in fact, that it makes the similarities between him and the Riddler very obvious. Both characters have a weird history, as each was introduced as a one-off bad guy in the Golden Age incarnation of Batman, and rarely seen after until they were brought back properly in the Silver Age. They were just a couple of wackos who happened to have a similar obsession with both the Caped Crusader and carrying out crimes with a particular linguistic slant. The similarities haven't stopped there, though. They both turned to a life of crime simply because they were super intelligent men who were bored, each with a specific form of madness, a fixation on the Dark Knight, and with constructing elaborate crimes. Number 9. The Marilyn Manson Makeover. In a decade of so many other superhero enterprises being proper whack, the 90s was pretty much saved by Batman the Animated Series. It was incredible, and I will fight you if you disagree. However, there have since been various animated series of varying quality. One example of a weird animated interpretation of the Bat Friends was 2004's The Batman, which, among other bizarre character redesigns like the Joker with dreads, included a goth rocker version of the Riddler, voiced by Robert Englund. Just a bit odd and shit, really. Number 8. Everything that happened in Hush. In Hush, it turned out that Enigma had been diagnosed with cancer and that he was using one of Ra's al Ghul's resurrecting Lazarus pits to try and cure himself of the disease. During his time in The Bath, he manages to deduce that Batman is Bruce Wayne and thus enacts a plan to get him. Teaming up with Dr. Thomas Elliot, Bruce Wayne's childhood friend, Riddler sicks multiple baddies on the Dark Knight. It doesn't work out, as these things tend not to, and after things go sour for our villain, he gets beaten to a pulp by Elliot and is stripped of his deductive powers. Eventually he manages to get himself out of this mess, but it was a weird time in the Riddler's life in general, and not one that seems to have affected any of his later appearances. Number 7. Riddler Reformed. After having been in a coma for nigh on a year following the Hush beating, the former villain awakens to find himself cured of insanity and yet still in possession of his immense intellect. At first, Riddler acted as a private consultant hired to work out crimes and mysteries that nobody else could fathom. Inevitably, this leads him to having encounters with both Batman and the extended Bat family, slowly earning their trust and eventually becoming a valued ally in their fight against the scum and villainy of Gotham City. It was all good fun until someone decided they were bored of the reformed Riddler and sent him back to being a bad guy for no real reason. Number 6. His dad abused him. During his time recuperating after having 7 shades kicked out of him, he recovers the repressed memories of his upbringing under his single father. You see, Mr. Enigma, envious of his son's intellectual prowess, assumed that his son wasn't some sort of wunderkind, but a big fat cheater, and so subjected him to regular beatings. From this sudden revelation, the Riddler realizes why he has such a compunction to leave behind clues as to his crimes. He has a deeply held need to prove his innocence, to absolve himself of any wrongdoing or deception. And I suppose you could call him a child abuse victim for no, that's in poor taste. I'll try again later. Number 5. Some of his riddles are really, really terrible. The Riddler has told a lot of terrible riddles in his time, which is pretty bad when you consider it's what his entire personality is based around. You could argue that it's down to the deep-seated need to get caught, but his crimes are all based on making riddles. So if he can't even manage that, what hope does he have for anything else? I'll leave you with one of his best. What people are always in a hurry? Russians. More of a joke than a riddle. Number 4. Jim Carrey. Some of the 90s Batman films were utter shit. Some weren't so bad. Joel Schumacher's Batman is utter shit.
Can I persuade you to take a sandwich with you, sir?
I'll get drive-through.
One of the symptoms? Jim Carrey's over-the-top rendition of the Riddler. In the comics, the Riddler is a bit Joker-like, but when it comes to how they act, they're radically different. The Riddler is a lot more grounded in his insanity, spending less time running around giggling like a maniac, Jim, and more time being quietly confident in his fiendish death traps. Apparently, Ace Ventura didn't get the memo, and when playing Edward Nygma in Schumacher's film, decided to go full The Mask on the character. I suppose you could call him a shit Riddler for wankers. Hashtag shit Riddler for wankers. Nailed it. Number 3. Edward Nygma is a stupid name. Look, the Joker's Jack Napier isn't great either, but it's still a bit of a stretch to Jackanape. The short single step from Edward Nygma to Enigma, though, that is just lazy. With a name like that, he was almost destined to a puzzle-based crime lifestyle if you believe in nominative determinism, which you should. If Batman's rogue gallery is anything to go by, you got bloody Harleen Quinzel in there too. Harleen Quinzel! None of them are worse than Edward Nygma in our minds, however, and even the 0-year change to spell it Nygma won't get us away from that. Never forget. Number 2. He's better as a Green Arrow villain. Unlike the Dark Knight, the Green Arrow doesn't have much in the way of classic villains. So rather than try and invent any original ongoing villains for Oliver Queen in the comic books, in the early noughties, DC editorial decided simply to export one of the Caped Crusaders' enemies from Gotham to Star City. And it actually worked quite well, really. You see, Green Arrow and the Black Canary beat Nygma up in the No Man's Land event, where Gotham was dominated by a series of earthquakes, so in the aftermath of Hush, he orchestrated a series of assaults that almost killed Arrow and his old sidekick Arsenal, and has plagued Star City on and off ever since. He actually sort of worked better as a Green Arrow enemy, since not only did he have the personal vendetta, but the Joker comparisons weren't as obvious. Number 1. He's better as a supporting character. The Riddler is a good character despite everything, but he might be better in a supporting role rather than as a fully fledged bad guy. One of the best depictions we've seen of the character has been in the Arkham series of Batman video games, where he's rarely, if ever, seen as an on-screen enemy. Instead, he provides the bulk of the optional missions, things that aren't essential to the plot, but are plenty of fun. And that's where he's at his best. Not an instigator or a major player in a big storyline, but as a small piece of a larger puzzle. That's the role he plays in The Long Halloween and Dark Victory, where his intelligence and puzzling skills are utilized by more forward-thinking and straight-up violent bad guys. It's also why he worked well as a Green Arrow villain. He tended to be overshadowed by the other, more unique Batman villains, whereas in Star City, he actually stood out. And that's our list. Are there any glaring issues we missed off? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You can even follow me here on Twitter if you fancy. I'm Ben from What Culture, and thanks for watching.